Thank you both for joining me. So I will ask some questions myself to set the scene, and then you guys are very welcome to also come in with your own questions for Piers and Owen. So Owen, ISSB, Piers, GRI. The empty chair is ESRS, so make of that what you will. Poor Richard.
I'll try to speak on his behalf too much.
So both jump in your own time. Why should regulators pick digital reporting instead of nice glossy PDFs?
After you.
Oh, well, of course, being a technologist, being a data guy, I would say to make the data more useful, to make it more comparable, to make it easier to access for people, to make even the reading of those glossy PDFs easier by identifying where in them the bit I'm actually interested is. All in all, I think it's probably talking to the choir here, so definitely talking to the converted in many cases, but that the benefits that digital reporting bring in terms of the usability of the data, and quite frequently actually in terms of improving the production process for data. It's quite noticeable when you have some kind of regulatory mandate, have some kind of disclosure mandate. If you tell someone that what they're going to do is print a nice pretty PDF, often when you discover how they're actually getting that information, collating it and producing it, you wince. If you tell them it's going to be a digital process at the end of it, often they think through the process a bit more and end up with a slightly smoother thing, which is a sort of side effect, really, a side benefit of digital reporting. The main one being that accessibility, comparability, and all those wonderful things that Richard was giving us with his little tick list. Even just I can actually identify where this information is, even though I don't speak whatever language this report was produced in. Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, actually, before yesterday, I think, if you'd have asked me that question immediately, I would have interpreted it as, can we just get rid of PDF reporting entirely, actually? And that's also, in a sense, a valid question as to whether PDF reporting plus digital reporting in the future is necessary, or whether we can actually do away with PDF entirely and just report digitally. I think from my perspective, I'm not sure, I don't know if I can speak for GRI on this actually at the moment, but certainly from my perspective, I think those PDF reports do have a value for certain stakeholders of companies. They absolutely do. So that means that I don't think that in the short term, at least, we can actually get rid of PDF, as it were. In the context of all the discussions yesterday around whether or not, if we frame this question more in terms of whether we want to use AI to harvest data, or whether we want to be able to just use structured approaches to be able to do so through digital formats, then I completely agree. I think it's far more useful, both from a transparency perspective and an accountability perspective, for companies to be able to report their information through digital formats. And I think there's another thing that, again, sort of reflecting on some of the conversations from yesterday, really struck me about AI approaches, for example. Perhaps two things that need to be noted. Number one, standards change. So, if we end up leaning too heavily on AI tools in order to, manage that process of getting data, then what do we do when there is a change to the standards themselves? So it will take some time to be able to actually overcome that. And the second reason is that standards change. It's not just the metrics themselves. It might be about the nature of the way in which different metrics within the standards relate to one another. And again, that's quite a major, or that could represent a change to reporting, which is very difficult to be able to capture quickly based on, for example, just AI approaches to getting data out of PDFs. So I think I violently agree that, we definitely do need the structured information.
You both get to keep your jobs, so that's
a
excellent.
That's good.
That's a minor issue.
Okay, well, Richard isn't here, so because I think he would know which countries were doing ESRS reporting. Mm-hmm. But if I'm in a regulator in a country somewhere else looking to adopt mandatory digital sustainability reporting, which taxonomy should I adopt?
It's cruel not to give Richard a voice in this one. So we'll just pause for a short second for you to imagine, and then we will say.
Well, I mean,
Shall I go first, so that then you can go as a top-up?
oh. Oh my goodness, fantastic! I love it. Well, my mum always said that I'm too diplomatic, so I think I don't know actually if Christina's in the room at the moment, so I should say GRI, of course. But I just think regulators need to understand, in a sense, what the different standards are doing and how they relate and what their needs are, and be able to kind of reflect that in their choice of taxonomy or choice of foundation for their own taxonomies. I think from a GRI perspective, we've long argued for, the double materiality is the right basis to form regulations and a comprehensive system. And on the one hand, obviously the ISSB deal with the financial side of it, and on the other hand, GRI deals with the impact side of it. So again, sort of being diplomatic, as it were, but, those serve as the foundation, as it were. And I think, that's probably what my advice would be.
Yeah. So I think that's fair to say. I mean, the first question is deciding what you want your regulation to do, what you want, and therefore which standard is most appropriate for you to follow. Yeah. Obviously, from the ISSB perspective, I will say, well, as a core, have the ISSB, and then if you decide that you want the impact and all of the additional material, then obviously layer GRI on top. But that's just the way it will be. I would pitch it. So partly it might depend on past history, where you're coming from, what state your companies are in. How big a jump you want to make in there to start with. I think it's fair to say that you have a lot of flexibility in your standards for scaling, but the ISSB, I think, allows you to start smaller first. And as you say, the ISSB is more financially focused standards, whereas you've got more on double materiality. So depending on the purposes of the exercise. But what I would say is, even if you're thinking of GRI, contemplate whether you can arrange your standards. There is apparently a lot of at the standards level, a lot of interoperability, and obviously we are progressively looking at that at the taxonomy level as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually, in a sense, sort of in analog to sustainability reporting itself, one of the first things you really need to understand is who your main stakeholders actually are in this entire process, because if they're capital markets and investors and banks, then clearly that might steer you primarily down or initially down an ISSB route. But yeah, if impacts on every other part of society and the environment really count, then that might change your decision making a little bit.
Thank you. So almost both got taxonomies released. You're very close. One of the benefits of building taxonomies is that by the time you've finished doing that particular publication, you've got a big long list of all the things you would like to improve or change or remove. So which bit of your taxonomy would you like to do differently?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. It's a bit tricky because it's hard to sometimes decouple this question from which bit of the standards would you want to do.
You have two lists,
Yeah, exactly. So I actually find myself a bit stuck. If it was purely just about the current standards and the taxonomy, I think, as I said this morning, the work around omissions is particularly tricky, or feels a bit difficult to integrate in the best possible way with our taxonomy. So I think that's probably where I'd start. But yeah, fundamentally it comes back to the standards themselves and making sure that the standards are actually digitally ready, essentially. And I think that's something that we need to reflect upon and work upon as a standard setter as well.
Thank you. I'd say fairly similar things. You have the traditional taxonomist's problem of written standards that you then digitize. We had the slight advantage of being able of actually producing the taxonomy at the same time as the standards. We had a little chance to feedback and tweak the standards, but there's always, as you say, you get to the end and it's a list of things you'd rather have changed about the standard. And then there's a list of things you'd rather have changed about the taxonomy. And mostly, I think, on the taxonomy, it's the emissions in the taxonomy, not
Yeah.
Although actually the same.
Emissions.
It's the things that the taxonomy possibly doesn't capture that we quite like. And this actually brings us to the question that was asked at the end of your session, which is around those attributes about facts. There are quite a few things in the ISSB taxonomy that are around, the ISSB standards that are around things like estimation, whether the data covers the whole area, whether there are any issues with it, which I don't think our taxonomies, as you know, you tried a mechanism for emissions and it was kind of awkward, and there are a few other places that we looked and thought that there's no neat mechanisms there that I would have liked to have had some time to spend some more time on as a group, to have worked a bit more of what we needed to do, to have developed some kind of at least consensus on an approach as to how to use what's out there so we could reliably actually put that out.
Yep.
The good news is, one of the reasons that we kind of didn't get there is that from an XBRL sense, a lot of that starts to play more in the instance, the reporting side, than actually in the taxonomy. And the taxonomist's job is more in guidance on how to use these features. The good news is there's still a chance for us to create that then, without necessarily reopening the taxonomies. Yeah. So that might be some of the SIG's work for the next few months.
Yep. Sounds good.
Next few months, I like that. Yeah.
I'm conscious I've been asking questions, so I do have more if needed, but does anyone have something they would like to ask? Piers or Owen, or both of them? We've lost a microphone. Thank you, John.
Thank you. So how are you working together? I'm curious. Did you had a draft of the taxonomy and then send it to each other, or is any chance to describe that? Is there? I know there is a work together, but how is it? Like, how are you discussing? Like, I am going to have dimensions for text blocks. Are you? So extensions are going to be allowed or not? Like, how is they working together?
Well, this is where we put a nod and a thank you in the direction of John and XBRL International for providing us with this, and Stuart for chairing it, providing us this forum, the special interest group, where we could get together and have exactly those conversations that were, we could look at what we were doing. Stuart could poke holes in the draft taxonomies that we had, a bit of advice how they don't work in practice. We could discuss options and directions. We've also worked bilaterally on various things, sharing drafts, with ESRS and Richard, as we were both sort of finalising in a sort of mutually overlapping, leapfrogging draft to final period to kind of eliminate as many of those unnecessary or annoying differences as we could kind of get to. We'd always like to do more. We'd always like to have more time to think, more chance to go back to the drawing board and sort of discuss. Eventually, your boss says, "Look, I need you to get this taxonomy out sometime this year, please," or early next year. And it's but we have had those conversations, and not just at the technical XBRL level either, also at the sort of policy and standard setting level, trying to look at early versions of those alignments between the standards, and if there are any little tweaks we could make to bring them a little closer.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously the bit of this that needs to be taken to the next stage and next level, as it were. I think, as you were saying to the previous previous question that you asked about us needing to get into the roots of how you do the mappings, that's clearly an area that we want to be able to collaborate on in the year to come, the years to come, but then also at the level of standard setting themselves. And we have, for example, between GRI and ISSB at the moment, there's this sort of pilot around the biodiversity standards and understanding how the two standards can work together in a more complementary way and how they can be developed in a more complementary way. I think we need to continue with that work basically, and help make sure that they really do flow through into one another, so that we can provide that really comprehensive basis for sustainability reporting. Yeah.
Thank you both very much. We have hit time, so there you are. It was because Richard wasn't here. So thank you both for the for the taxonomies, but thank you for being here today and taking our questions. They're around, so collar them in the breaks. But can I ask for a round of applause for, not Richard, Piers and Owen.
Let's have a round of applause anyway.
We'll applaud him anyway. Thank you.